Minasan konnichiwa und willkommen. And today is another review. But this time, we're going to be taking a look at a musical from 1964 by Allan Lerner and Frederick Loewe. And it's called My Fair Lady, starring Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. And before I even start the video, I have some really sad news to tell everyone. I'm sorry to say that one of my favorite actors, Theodore Bikel, has died yesterday due to natural causes. May Theodore Bikel rest in peace. My heart goes out to his family and fellow actors who have worked with him over the years. Without further ado, let's get this video started. Well, before I even do that, I'll give you a bit of the history lesson. It was originally based on a play of the same name by Allan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewe. But that too was actually based off a play by the name of Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. And it takes place in merry old England. That's right, folks, merry old England, where we see our main protagonist, Eliza Doolittle, played by Audrey Hepburn, with a really bad Cockney accent. And then we see our secondary protagonist, Henry Higgins, played by Rex Harrison, actually teach Eliza the basics on how to turn from a common Cockney woman to probably the most beautiful proper lady he could ever dream of. And he tried to make her speak the proper English language. And later of course, there had to be hardships and a lot of problems along the way. But all of that actually paid off. Well, you know what I'm talking about. As I was saying, that effort actually paid off when Eliza Doolittle actually perfected the English language perfectly. I think she's got it. I think she's got it. The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. I think she's got it. But George, I think she's got it. And then the next day, Henry Higgins decided to give Eliza a test run by going to that Ascot place, where we see a lot of people dressed up in negro y blanco. You know, black and white. Because black and white was still used in television programs at the time, like Bewitched or the Donna Reed show. But I'll talk about those shows in different videos. But near the end of that horse scene, it didn't really go out too well. When Eliza verbally said, "Come on, Delver, move your bloomin' arse." And of course, everyone was freaking out about that. And then they decided to try again by taking Eliza to the Grand Ball, which is basically your typical Cinderella story, or your typical rags to riches kind of story. Because we've seen numerous attempts at those kind of stories. And at the ball, it almost went off without a hitch, without a hinge. But then Henry Higgins' former student showed up on the scene, played by the legendary Theodore Bikel, by the way, who I talked about earlier in the video. And he was obviously talking about snooty remarks. And of course, he wanted to ask Eliza to dance with him. And of course, he did just that. And then a lot of people were speculating rumors about not going off too well, which of course did not go too well. Believe me, dude, I've seen the film numerous times on TCM and on DVD, both letterboxed and anamorphic, which already talked about the widescreen and full frames format in the previous video, if you want to check that out. And then we see Eliza just run away from that place, where she comes across that creepy dude, who was played by Jeremy Brett, by the way. But his singing voice is done by Prince Philip himself, Bill Shirley. And of course, her dad, who was played by Stanley Holloway, by the way, also got suckered in, but by an American no less. Then let's fast forward to the end of the film, where Henry Higgins wanted desperately to get Eliza back. And of course, she returns right on the spot. And the last line that was ever said in the movie was like this: "Where the devil are my slippers?" Now that was one fucking hilarious way to end a movie. That's right. Where the devil are my slippers? I tell you, that gets me every fucking time I watch it, because it is a great classic from Warner Brothers. Thus we end the film. Now for some more of the fun facts about the movie. In 1962, the film rights for My Fair Lady was bought out by Warner Brothers. Then years later, it was bought out by CBS, and then by Warner Brothers again, and then by CBS again. What the hell's going on here? I just don't get it. And originally, Julie Andrews was going to be portraying Eliza Doolin, but of course she was too busy doing Mary Poppins at the time, so they got Audrey Hepburn instead. And I tell you, that was a clever idea, of actually using Audrey instead of Julie. Because Julie Andrews would do another musical a year later, and that was The Sound of Music, which I'll talk about in a different video. And many of the some of the original musical actors like Rex Harrison and Stanley Holloway actually returned to reprise the roles in the film. But oddly enough, when the film was just starting to be made, Jack Warner, the boss of Warner Brothers, wanted fucking James Cagney to play the character. But of course, that never worked. Thus, Rex Harrison came back to reprise his role. And so did Stanley Holloway, who played Eliza Doolittle's father. And I forgot to mention some of the great musical numbers in the film and in the original musical by Allan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewe, who are basically the poor man's version of Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. And when the film was finally released in 1964, everybody went nuts over it. It was filmed in a process called Super Panavision 7, which is still the 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio. And I tell you, the imagery for the film is just fucking fantastic. Jack L. Warner himself would be proud to know that. Oh, and by the way, the movie was directed by George Cukor. That's right, fucking George Cukor. Probably one of the greatest directors who have ever lived. Well, that and Alfred Hitchcock and Martin Scorsese. Yes, even Francis Ford Coppola in the Godfather trilogy and Apocalypse Now. Okay, that should be it for the video for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, comment. And before I do my usual sign-off, I give the film 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5 stars, 2 thumbs up. And as always, amigos, au revoir und auf Wiedersehen.